We'd like to call the February 1, 2018 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. If the administrator would call the roll.
Sure. Chair Bagelman,
Here?
Dane,
Here.
French,
Here.
Ritters,
Here.
Hagensick, User,
Here.
Olson, Vice Chair Payne,
Here.
and Solheim.
Here.
Thank you, Ben. The agenda is before you. Do we have a motion to approve it as it was sent?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Those in favor indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. The agenda is approved. The minutes of the January 4, 2018 meeting were again sent out. Are there any additions, corrections? And if not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve as written?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say yes.
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 Those opposed, no. And the minutes for January are approved. Then, anything in communications?
I don't have anything to present tonight.
Okay, we'll move directly then to the public hearing. Public hearing on the rezoning request from R1 Single Family Residential District to C2 Commercial District, and to amend the future land use plan from residential to commercial for 4.4 acres on the northwest corner of 4th Street Southwest and 10th Avenue North Southwest. Casey's Marketing Company applicant and Julia A. Engelbrecht are requesting a zoning change for Engelbrecht's property from R1 Single Family Residential to C2 General Commercial. The property is located on the northwest corner of the intersection of 4th Street Southwest and 10th Avenue Southwest at 1032 4th Street Southwest. The proposed rezoning will match the C2A permitted land uses southeast of the intersection, and there is R1 single-family zoning and R3 townhome residential to the north. The Waverly City Golf Course is to the west. There's city water and sewer service available to this property. The future land use plan calls this area out for commercial usage with residential behind commercial frontage. Public notice was given to those within 250 feet of the subject property and publicly advertised in the local Waverly newspaper. Before we go any further, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of our mayor, Dean Soash. Dean, good to have you with us. For some of you who weren't around, Dean served for many years on this commission, and we appreciated his work then and looking forward to working with him now. So good to have you with us. Well, good evening. There are some basic rules of decorum for a Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. I know you've had this topic back in November, but tonight's question before the Planning and Zoning Commission is to consider a petition to change the zoning for property on the northwest corner of 10th Avenue and 4th Street Southwest. Be mindful, please, that this public hearing is your opportunity to express your points of view to the Commission. This is the public hearing format that we use. I've just read the description of the petition as printed on the agenda. I will ask staff for any comments they might have to offer. I will ask if any communications have been received regarding this matter. The applicant petitioners will then be invited to present their application. After that, I will open the public hearing. After receiving comments from the public, I will close the public hearing, and the commission will be asked to make and second the motion. That's the motion that's before them. The commission will then discuss the motion, and they may have questions of the presenters, the staff, and perhaps members of the public. At the close of the discussion, I will call for a roll call vote. The results of our vote will be sent as a recommendation to Waverly City Council for their determination. You'll recall the last time we were here, believe it was you, Dave, who reminded people that we are a recommending body, not a determining body. And if we, in fact, do not recommend the action, the city council will be required to have a supermajority in order to overturn that. Here are some ground rules if you choose to speak. We want you to come to the podium and speak directly into the microphone. There are a lot of people at home that want to hear what you have to say, as well as those of us who are here in the chambers. State your name and address, direct your comments and/or your questions to the chair. Keep your comments as brief as possible. Typically, you'll have 3 to 5 minutes, and return visits are encouraged after everyone with a point of view has had the opportunity to express themselves. Keep your comments relevant to the proposal and the issues. Try not to duplicate information that has already been presented. And please remember, this is not a dialogue. Cross-examination by the public of persons entering testimony, applicants, staff, or the commission is simply not permitted. So with that, Ben, do we have anything that's come in, mail, whatever?
I did speak with a couple of property owners that live to the north. Just inquiries about the general status of the project. They wanted to know the scope of the project. Some general concern with sound, light, loss of view shed, anticipated possible traffic problems resulting from this. And that pretty much sums it up.
Good. And we did have one piece of correspondence, I believe, from the Dutzman family.
Yes, that should be included in the packet online as well, so you can read that.
Okay. Okay. Well then, at this time, I'd like to ask the applicant petitioners to come up and address the group with the proposal. And what I'd like you to do is to kind of stay in that general vicinity so that we don't have you walking back and forth and back and forth. So,
I need
please.
I'm low on my steps, so I'd actually prefer to go back and forth if you don't mind.
Those Fitbits are,
Good evening, Honorable Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Wally Pelds with Pelds Engineering Company, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50316. Representing Casey's General Stores tonight. We've been looking at this site. This site was with you previously with another engineer from my staff, Laura Jondal. I believe she presented identifying this location. We subsequently went to City Council and had many of the neighbors show up, at which point I suggested that we have a neighborhood meeting to discuss some of the concerns that we might be able to address prior to having out a public hearing, hashing out different points of view. It's much easier in an informal setting. So at that point, we withdrew our application because we were coming up on timelines on needing to make submissions and weren't ready to commit to certain things until we met with the neighbors to see if we couldn't address their concerns to the best of our ability. So we're here before you tonight to, again, ask for the zoning change for the north parcel that's a part of this property. I do have some conceptuals to show you because some things were brought up about views and different things. If you'd like, I'd be happy to show that to you. It's not necessarily germane to the zoning issue, but it is germane to the neighbors. So if you...
I think let's do that. And for people, the TV on this side of the room, on the north side of the room, is the one that's functional tonight. We've got a mechanical problem on the south TV, but if you'll direct your attention to that TV, I think you'll be able to see all of this.
Okay. And let me give you a brief description of what's... This picture right here is as if a drone is hovering over the condominium units next door. We've blanked out their roofs, their second levels, but we did leave the partition walls in between them to model the perspective that they would potentially have. This is a short video. It starts in the far east unit, then it jumps to the second unit, third, and then fourth. Each of those units subsequently steps down in elevation approximately 2 feet from our measurements in the field and from the information that we had. And I can start the video so you can see it and briefly discuss. Some of the concerns were noise, visual impairment, and as you'll see, this is actually at building height in the first unit to the east, looking east, then it pivots, and now we're looking to the south. We've created a berm along the top with a 6-foot cedar fence. As you can see the light poles peeking above. As you get to the second unit, the car wash location roof line does start to appear a bit, but we left it at 6 feet because the balance from what our landscape architect said, an 8-foot fence really starts to look industrial-ish instead of residential. Because we can change it to 8 feet, but we felt it was kind of out of scale when we're trying to buffer to the neighbors. Additionally, we did all of the plantings in size that you would see when we plant them originally. We didn't have, I ran out of time basically to model because we were doing grading, trying to lift things up, showing them what it looks like. And we did end up addressing I believe most of the concerns. We did move the car wash 50 feet further south. The visual impact is, again, it's based on their upper level, looking out their back deck. For the most part, they should just see the fence and the light poles, and then as you go further away, the screen, how it works, it's just a linear visual line. The closer I am, the higher the skew angle. The further away, the lower it drops, and that's why it starts to pick up the car wash building. Additionally, there were some concerns about our detention on the westerly portion of the property next to the floodway, and they were concerned that we would be creating an above-ground detention basin. We have subsequently went to underground detention, so it will just look like a grassy knoll off to the west. We've also provided, I know, a draft form of a developer's agreement restricting the westerly 125, or the westerly most 125 feet from ever being developed to maintain green space. And then the rest of the green spaces where we have our stormwater detention facility underground in that slope that you can see along this bank here. And if you would have any other questions at this point, again, this is very close to a finished site plan, but it's kind of a cart before the horse. We want to get the zoning first. We will be going through the site planning process where we would be able to address even more comments as well. And if you'd have any questions of me, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I think let's do those after we do the public hearing, and that way we can hear what other folks have to say and do the whole thing then.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. If there's anyone who has something that they'd like to say, please come up, and the microphone is over here. Please speak directly into it. It's amazing how little distance can separate you from that microphone, and we lose you to, especially the folks that are at home. So, please.
Good evening. My name's John Campbell. I'm here to represent my wife, Pam Campbell, and myself. We reside at 1001 10th Avenue Southwest in Waverly, and we've been a member of this community for going on 52 years. We've been at our present residential location for a little over 20. We're very well familiar with the traffic that is on 10th. We've been there and actually purchased our place when it was nothing but 2-lane. So we went through the updates, the speed limit changes, and in all that time, some of the same problems still exist. And that would be at the intersection that you're now proposing to do the rezoning. The fact that the city does an extremely good job does not change what Mother Nature will do to that hill. And if we want to call it coming up from the north, going south, the old Burger King Hill, as everyone calls it, when it becomes icy, it's horrendous. The traffic flow from the east and west on 10th is probably greater than any other street other than possibly Highway 3. The speed limit has been changed multiple times. And with regards to the intersection you're talking about, I have personally seen many accidents that are caused by backup traffic trying to turn onto 10th from the south. And it is heavily used by the school buses. When we had the detour, which brought a lot more truck traffic, it was sometimes backed up as far as the McDonald's entrance in order to get into the turning lane to go west of the 10th. While I'm not opposed to Casey's, they have wonderful pizza and not too bad of donuts either. I am opposed to that location for any type of store that is going to have heavy traffic by not only cars, but by trucks. They're going to have delivery semis for both fuel and for supplies. I feel that it is the wrong place for that to be rezoned. Without seeing an exact site plan as far as egress, determining whether or not you're going to go ahead and complete 10th, which was proposed a long, long time ago underneath the railroad bridge, allow for more turning lanes. And I think with the planned bridge and the extension of Greenbrier, you're talking about an enormous increase in traffic at that intersection. I don't think it can handle that short of distance for traffic wanting to turn in and come back out of. So I hope that you'll look at it from a safety standpoint and that there's a lot of things that we still haven't had answered. One of the things that I am concerned about is when 10th was done, there was an agreement with the Engelbrechts and the city, which allowed for additional driveways off of 10th because it was going to be residentially developed. That changes a whole lot of things in my mind as to why something would be granted, and now I'm understanding you're saying that it is in the site plan for future use to be commercial. So I thank you for your time. I'll let someone else speak.
Thank you, John.
Good evening. My name is Jim Jansen. My wife, Carl, and I reside at 1020 4th Street Southwest. And in your mind's eye, you can picture that one property lot to the north of our proposed site tonight. We've been there about 25 years. I have a pretty specific question, and there's not a chart that I think we can all mutually see. But the diagram I'd like to refer to is the one I think produced by Casey's that has a site plan I think that you shared with our neighborhood a while back. And it shows, is this something you guys have in your packet?
Yeah.
Can you, that would be great. You bet, that would be great. Thanks, Ben. Okay. There's probably bigger issues that will be discussed tonight, but this is a very specific one which entails our driveway, which will be located just north of the proposed driveway of Casey's on 4th Street. Again, it's a,
You should be able to just point, yeah.
okay. I'm going to point out this area, which again, by the scale of things, is going to be almost impossible for you to see. I wish I had a larger diagram. I do not. As I looked at the scale of the diagram and looked at the distance on the diagram between my south boundary of my driveway and the north boundary of the proposed driveway, using the scale on the chart, I get somewhere around 15 to 20 feet between those two driveways. If I'm misreading that, and that's possible, I would like Casey's or someone else to correct me on my measurements there, because I do not intend to mislead. I just want to make sure that my rough estimate is approximate, okay? So if that's the case, if my measurements and scale is the case, we're talking about 15 to 20 feet from the edge of my driveway to the edge of the proposed driveway. And another way of saying that, that's roughly between Heidi and I, okay, in terms of scale. You could probably see what my concern is that Casey's driveway, as people are going to the south, will be very busy. I will be trying to turn in and out into my driveway. And I just asked probably a rhetorical question at this point: what will be the traffic pattern established around Casey's east-facing driveway? Will there be right turns only? Will drivers be able to turn left going north in there, which may have the tendency to kind of back up traffic? And I speak from experience there, as I watch at between 4:30 and 6 o'clock at night as the traffic coming from the south going north. And I have a difficult time sometimes turning into my driveway because of that. And now with a larger traffic flow, what will that do to the safety of my driveway and the congestion around that projected driveway as well? So in this case, a pretty specific concern, but I think it probably speaks to the larger issue of traffic flow around the corner of 10th and 4th, and then the entranceways being proposed, and how that will impact my safety and ability to get out onto that street in a safe manner.
Okay, we'll pick up the detail on that later,
you.
but we'll certainly pick it up.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have others?
Larry Buchholz. I'm here working with the Condominium Association, and I'm an engineer. Traffic engineering were in my roots. I've worked with consulting engineers before that. I was Public Works Director and City Engineer in Waverly for 5.5 years, and in Cedar Falls for 12.5 years after that. And I'd like to note that since this is zoning, I'll start with that, but I also have some traffic safety issues. This is, I would look at as an inappropriate spot zone. You have properties immediately on the north side, an R1 and an R3 zone. An R4 zone where you maybe had an apartment complex, and possibly your R3 in Waverly allows that, I don't know. But an apartment complex, would be an adequate buffer. And there you have non-permanent residents, that sort of thing. But a high-quality condominium development where you have people, permanent residents, tax-paying residents, in a high-quality development like this is inappropriate adjacent to a high-volume commercial parcel like this. Their site plan shows 8 fuel islands and 25 parking stalls around the outside of the building. That's a very high-volume convenience store. It's bigger than what you have here at this point in town. It's not contiguous with any other commercial here in the area. The southeast quadrant of the 10th Avenue, 4th Street intersection is commercial, but there's quite a separation between them. So this is clearly an isolated commercial spot zone. From a traffic safety standpoint, it's been brought up a little bit in the past by a couple people that your northbound traffic, when you have a platoon of 8 to 10 vehicles from that stoplight, when you have a driveway down the hill like this is showing, you're going to have, if any of those early vehicles want to stop and make a left turn, you're really wide open to a lot of rear-end collisions. It's going to be a major traffic issue. I'm not sure how it's going to be addressed. The site plan doesn't show anything in terms of off-site improvements or anything that could be done there. North or southbound traffic on 4th Street, although not as bad, also would present some issues. 8th Avenue is the access to the condominium association, and as you have people that want to access this convenience store, that traffic will begin to back up, and it already backs up at times to where 8th Avenue is not very accessible for the residents. In the future, you'll have 10th Avenue is going to be a major arterial. It'll be the only major four-legged arterial intersection in the city. You'll have 4th Street, you'll have 10th Avenue, and 10th Avenue is connected to Highway 3 East. You'll have two major arterials there. And you have the same type of situation for westbound traffic when you get to that point, because you'll have vehicles coming through that intersection, and there again you have another driveway where you'd have vehicles turning and others coming in behind them, and it's starting to come down a hill there. In 2 dimensions, it doesn't look that bad, but when you add that third dimension, that vertical dimension, there's some major traffic issues to really be concerned about here. I think that's the main things that I have, but primarily I would view it as an inappropriate spot zone, and there's some significant traffic safety issues with this that really need to be addressed and haven't been addressed.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I could make the reach between that and this, but I'll do my best.
Move the microphone.
Okay. All right. Is that still within my voice range? I'll talk loud. I was a teacher. I can do that. Yeah, I want you to hold it the whole time. I keep things from sliding off here. My name's Sally Williams. Live at 435 8th Avenue Southwest, and I'm happy to live there. Instead of going forward, I'd like to go backwards just a little bit to this, where we left off with the city council. Can I just lay this here? Will that show? Mm-hmm. When we were at the second reading of the city council, this memo went out to the city council, and I really thought what Ben said here about the policy issues applied to this. When he said to the city council, does the proposed zoning change promote the city's future land use map directions, promote the goals of the city comprehensive land use plan, and provide for supporting harmonious, efficient, compatible adjacent land usage to the existing development and street network? That's what this city is about. So I went to your comprehensive land use plans. It's long. Somebody spent a lot of time on that.
We did.
Yeah, and it says, prior to consideration for the Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Adjustment, City Council, review the development proposal using the following guidelines. And that's what I looked at in deciding what to talk about today. Isn't that nice to know somebody uses this stuff? And I didn't want to just pick and choose, thinking I was just favoring some and not others, so they're all here, but I underlined the ones that I thought really applied. Compatibility with neighboring surrounding land users, consideration for the potential credible impact of adjacent property, the impact of the proposed development on traffic generation and the flow of the area, and the potential impact of the proposal on the environment and environmentally sensitive areas of our city. I don't want to lose it all. Some of it might be fine, but all of it would be a disaster.
You can use a table behind you if it's a better surface.
So I went to the current zoning, and I hope this is current. It's what I pulled off the website. Here is the land in question, right here. I don't know why that jumped off the map as being commercial. Why it looks like that. Before I go any further, the last time we were here, someone couldn't understand why people living here couldn't get out this road. That road's not there. You need a golf course or a horse, or golf cart or a horse to get through that road because it's just not there. And I don't know why it's here. So anyway, criteria for making this commercial, here's a cemetery. Here's residential. Here's a golf course. Here's a golf course. Here's a church. Land only has 4 sides and 4 corners, and there's only one corner that is contiguous. I learned a new word tonight. Contiguous with this as commercial. Not only is it not there now, there isn't much potential for it. You are not going to rezone a cemetery commercial, nor, I don't plan to be commercial, nor the golf course, nor the church. I even wondered, is there a plan to make 10th Avenue a commercial zone, a commercial alley? Well, you've got soccer fields, you've got residential, you have some commercial being developed here, some residential 2-family there, a cemetery. This is still residential down the way. This is now commercial, and reading the minutes from this committee, you're already having some problems with trucks in that area. So let's look at that future land use map. Which I think is close to the Bible here. If we orient ourselves, this is the land in question that has now been labeled future as commercial, eliminating the incorrect property. Here's the cemetery, here's the golf course, here's the golf course. The one other thing that you see on this map that you probably don't see on the other map, let me get my note. I tried to be very efficient with my time because I don't want to waste yours. Is you see the recreational trail in the red dotted line. And if for any reason you think that's not being used, Waverly should be so proud of that trail. Every day, early in the morning, you see these people that run 2 and 3 miles, 5 miles before they go to work. Then we see the kids going to the new middle school on their bikes, their skateboards. Kids really do still go to school like that. Then you see the young moms pushing their strollers with their babies up the hill for exercise. A little later in the day, when the seniors have had their second cup of coffee, they're out walking. So it is used, and it is well used. The other thing, this little thing right here, right there, it's called a gateway node. Now, I tried my best to find a definition for that.
It's a planning term.
The only other place I could find those on the future land use map were the entryways into Waverly, except right there. So I'm assuming that in the future, Waverly considers that their busiest intersection. I think you referred to it, Larry, as being the only one that has. And here's our land right there. I like this one the best. This is what it really looks like. This is your FEMA map. Here's the land, and I hope you can see it. Land right here. That is in question. I have tried to put the red X's as close as I can to where those driveways might be. The one thing that's added here is the water hazard line. Previous meetings, that was a big concern, but on this map, you can see where it is. 2 inches of rain, and we have a river in our backyard. We refer to it as the Condo River, and there it is. So here's the water in the backyard. And how covering this much land with concrete and making it impermeable affects the watershed into that, I'm not the scientist that knows the answer to that question. Again, now you can really see, here's your cemetery, here's your residential, here's the golf course. This is now developed. But, okay, the traffic pattern. Not just concerned with can people get to this corner, but can people get through town? Not everybody wants to stop at that corner. Some people just want to get to work. Some people just want to get home at the end of the day. So if you're coming from the north, I think this will help explain a little bit what Jim was talking about and Larry. Coming from the north, here's 8th Avenue. I personally would swear to it, have been at this stoplight trying to make a left-hand turn. I can drive up here, make this turn, turn around in the Baptist Church parking lot, come back here, make a left-hand turn, and wave to the guy that was across from me when I was sitting there waiting for the left-hand turn. Here's Jim's driveway. Here's that next driveway, is that right, Jim? Okay. Here's the driveway that he's concerned about. Stretch from here to here, Larry talked about. Here's that one-lane right-hand turn to nowhere, where the semis head down the lane, and then they realize they didn't want to make a right-hand turn, and then they try to move into the other lane because they didn't know. I'm not the traffic expert. Common sense is enough there. Coming from the other direction, here's the parkway. When that connects with Highway 3, we can only guess how much traffic we're going to have coming down that road. Wisely, I think the city is limiting this area to driveway back here off that intersection. Coming from this direction, again, I'm going to refer to Larry because I can't even begin to imagine how you make your right, left, whatever turn you want to make and get where you're going. This way, again, I can tell you for a fact, once every day the traffic is backed up to the viaduct. We can look out and we see the traffic. Traffic is not getting through that intersection. My next concern would be pedestrian safety. We have this wonderful recreation trail, and you really get to see it here. Here we go. And now you're putting 2 high-traffic driveways across it. And considering that anybody that wants to use that trail from here to here is going to have to hit the pedestrian crosswalk to make it. And you know what a pedestrian stop does to traffic. So again, considering not only can you get from here to there, but how fast can you get and what's the flow of traffic? There are reasons why the city has put so much time into a future land use map and a comprehensive land use plan. Because when you make this decision, it's for a long time. You don't get a redo. You don't get a second chance. We live with it. Not just this year. You know, it appears to me like it's almost taking a shoehorn to get that in there now. What's it going to be like in 5 years, 10 years? We're going to grow. You are the gatekeepers. You're the gatekeepers of our town. And so your vote tonight, you need to ask yourself, and I'm taking these right off of your comprehensive land use plan. I'm going to take a drink. I'm working hard. Will it promote the safety for both pedestrians and vehicular drivers in the town of Waverly? Will it lessen congestion? Will it facilitate the flow? Is it compatible with the adjacent land use? Are you comfortable with the environmental impact? Is this really the most appropriate use of this land? Is it in compliance with the city's future land use map? And does this proposal promote the city's comprehensive land use plan? If this is the right plan for the city, you're the gatekeepers, then you vote to approve. But you have the option to not approve and to consider some other zoning that might better promote the safety, the street networks, and the environment of our city. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Are there others? Let's give it one more shot. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing. At this time, we need to come back together and have the council take the commission take a look at the motion itself. We do need to address that question about the distance between the two driveways, if we've got that. So, we've closed the public hearing. Let's take a look, get a motion on the floor, and then we begin the debate.
Let me clarify this. You want the motion before we do the discussion?
I'd like to have the discussion be on the motion.
I
If that
move-
means we have
yeah.
to change the motion, we can.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezoning request from R1 to C2 and to amend the future land use plan from residential to commercial for land described on the northwest corner of 4th Street Southwest and 10th Avenue Southwest to the City Council.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion begins.
What body is responsible for the traffic, allowing new driveways on either 10th or 4th Street?
It's twofold. Iowa DOT governs 4th Street Southwest in coordination with the city. And we use SUDA standards, AASHTO standards, which are national standards. So that's more of a site plan review type of question that once, wherever this ends up in the process, let's say it does go for it, at that time, we will evaluate all possibilities with the engineers, find the appropriate, the maximum distances that are afforded with the conditions.
I think it also should be said that 10th Avenue would be the city's responsibility, except where it comes in proximity to the 4th Street. So the DOT would be wanting to make sure that there are proper distances from the intersection when it comes to driveways,
All directions.
all directions.
Ben, can you address and respond to the concern about the impervious surface and how that's taken care of?
Sure. They have proposed an underground detention system, which essentially the amount of water would be greater, however, the flow would be the same. They're obligated to make the rate of water flow the same coming off the property as it was before development. Am I correct, Mr. Engineer?
Please,
Okay.
please come up to the microphone.
That was a yes.
Yeah.
That was a yes.
I got the
So-
yes, but there's going to be
It's
more.
a concept that it will be more than likely more volume, however, the rate would be the same.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that. It's basically we're taking a,
Of course it is.
it takes a certain amount of time that we evaluate for it to go through the grass and percolate and get to the drainage swale as it is now. So what we have to do is try and mimic that, and then the code is actually a little bit more stringent, because when you get a 100-year storm, which in this area is a little over 7 or 8 inches in 15 minutes, right? Then inches per hour, that rain rate, then we are charged with, we have to hold that amount, and we can only release at the 5-year release rate or the 2-year release rate, depending on some of the stormwater quality. When we have gone now to a stormwater underground detention system, we get a secondary benefit. It actually recharges the groundwater. It is a greener detention type basin. And that was one of the things that the neighbors were concerned about, is having this bowl collecting, being wet, tall grasses, those types of things. So we did augment our site and add underground detention instead of utilizing the green space that's available to us.
While he's there, can we have
Sure.
him talk about the
Sure.
distance between the two driveways?
I believe, I don't have an exact measurement, but just looking from our scale on our drawing, I'm estimating about between 50 and 55 feet between the two drives is the way it's shown now. However, all of that will be dictated by the DOT and the city. We are, like, again, as I'm mentioning, we're just in the beginning processes. We have submitted a preliminary traffic study, both to the city and to the DOT for review, based on their principles. And some of the locations, I know there's one thing was the DOT is asking us to push the access on the south entrance about 300 feet, yet the city has a different master plan that we're not aware of that will pull that entrance a little bit closer. The other thing I can mention is that we don't want rear-end traffic entering our, if it's hard to get into our site, people don't come to our site. So it behooves us to work with the city. We have many times, and I just confirmed with representative from Casey's that it is not a big issue for us to help with some of the public improvements. If we need to add turn lanes, widen the road to make the conditions safer, that's what we'll handle at the site planning section of this. The part that I can't control is the traffic signal timing. I have observed it. We did do traffic counts, and there are some issues when the level of service becomes cumbersome. If you continue to grow at the rate that you've been growing, which is about 3% traffic per year, within 10 to 20 years, you're going to have some pretty serious problems out there. And I think that's where we've been working with city staff, that they've already recognized that that's going to be an issue. And this is a good time to address it. We're here to help. We're not here to make it worse. And hopefully that helps with the driveway spacing, because the DOT will tell us, well, this driveway's too close, so you need to nudge it down. A couple different things as well. So
I can address with the DOT. We've actually met with the DOT within the last 10 days, and not necessarily to discuss this, because we had just got the traffic study the same day. So we provided that traffic study to the DOT, and they are in the process of evaluating that. It actually was ironic because the DOT was here to talk about 4th Street and the 4th Street project that goes to the north. And it's going to be a pretty critical part of what we're doing if we do this with Casey's is to make something go in conjunction with what changes we're going to make on 4th Street. As you know, I think we've talked about 4th Street being a 3-lane in the future. From 8th Avenue to the north, it would be like the first block, 2.5 blocks that are been redone north of the dry run. It'll be a 3-lane with a center turn lane, and it should be that way all the way through the 8th Avenue intersection. When that happens, that road will be widened, and they'll have to make it work and flow into the current 4th Street between 10th and 8th. When they do that, there's some changes that have been considered, and nothing's been decided on at this point. But there would be a center turn lane from the south to the north onto 8th Avenue, and there would be 1 lane going straight, 1 lane going right, and 1 lane going left. Coming at you then from the north would be a single lane going up the hill for a period of time before it breaks into 2 lanes. Right now, there's an immediate 2-lane when you get past 8th Avenue. Before Casey's was ever a thought, there was a discussion, there was planning about keeping that 1 lane until you got up farther up the hill. So there's really a plan to make that traffic work better on 8th Avenue. And I think that's really not, some of that's going to be relevant to the Casey's discussion, but most of that's relevant because it doesn't work right now, and it has to be fixed. We know that. Then you look at the intersection of 10th and 4th. That's an intersection that we knew would grow eventually. That's why there's left turn lanes. That's why there's left turn signals. At this point, we hadn't changed the signals yet because the traffic counts hadn't required that. But clearly, at our peak times, and that hour in the morning, that hour maybe at noon, that hour or hour and a half in the afternoon, it becomes very difficult to get through that intersection with a lot of traffic turning left. We are in the process of working on that to get the timing and to decide when we're going to launch that. And there may be an arrow going both ways from coming up the hill to the left. We'll have to do that once the parkway is finished, because there will be traffic going that direction. So we know this is an intersection that's going to require additional signage in the future, and additional traffic control. And that will help the left turn. If you have a 6-second or a 10-second left turn lane in the morning, you won't see those backups. And if you have the same going on the Parkway in the future, back and forth, east and west, you won't see that same backup. And we think that intersection's been designed to handle a lot bigger volume. That's the way it was built. It has those turn lanes. It has the ability to be marked for that. So we think that that we can work with this if we're told that we have to work with this. When we talk about the DOT and the City of Waverly's, we're off just a little bit on that west driveway on the 10th Avenue. We wanted to line it up actually with the driveway that's the short driveway that's shown there. So it's about 25 feet difference. And I think that's because we want to keep it across from the church. We want the intersections to be across from one another. What that also does is 10th Avenue is wider there, and right now, there's a hatched area that goes right down the middle of the road that people don't use. What that can be used for is an actual left turn lane into the Casey's before you get to the intersection. So we're looking at how this could be planned out. That's one thing that we would discuss with Casey's and their engineer in the site review process, the traffic process. The DOT wants to make sure it's as safe as possible. They're not going to let us have that intersection onto 4th or that driveway onto 4th unless it can be done safely. But that road affords that opportunity too, because there's a left turn lane that could be almost as long as the one that's on 4th right now that you can turn left onto the Parkway. So there's ways of doing the traffic configurations that would make it safer, and that's what we intend to do. Again, we are going way ahead of ourselves when we're starting to talk about traffic patterns and those kinds of things for this type of a development. But we know it's important because it does matter to people who are in that area, live in that area, drive in that area. Talking about the zoning, I guess the one thing that when I hear that this is a spot zoning, I disagree. The definition for me is what are on the 4 sides of a parcel. If 2 of your parcel sides are an urban arterial and one of the busiest streets, that's an urban use. And when you're adjacent to an urban arterial, that's most likely a commercial type place for that to be. And so the fact that there is housing there already complicates it, and it does make it more difficult because then you have to look at how consistent can it be, what kind of screening can you do, what kind of way can you buffer between the 2 uses in the best possible way. But there's a lot of places along the urban arterials where you have commercial along the arterial and you have housing or other uses right behind those uses. Down 10th Avenue, there's an entire residential development behind that strip of commercial that's right adjacent to 10th Avenue. And we try our best to make it work by shielding and protecting those and dividing those 2 uses as best as we can. And that's why Casey's has responded to what the city has asked for, what the residents have asked for, and they don't want to see or hear as much as they have to. I mean, if they didn't put the screening or if they didn't make those efforts. So our goal is, if this is approved, we want to make it as good as possible for the people that are adjacent to it, as safe as possible for the people that are driving into it and driving out of it and by it. So that's our goal in this situation. We do think it is an appropriate use for that reason. It's adjacent to 2 arterial roads. The traffic does make us concerned, but we think those things can be resolved, those issues.
Thank you, Bill. Other questions?
Based on the varying elevations with where the townhouse is, with the elevation view, I think was very helpful that way. What does that do from a noise perspective? Having a property higher than the surrounding area, does that?
Yeah, that was the intent. We actually ended up doing some berming along that edge where you saw the cedar fence. We're trying to create a barrier to make sound bounce up and over the property. If it's a line of sight kind of issue, the wave travels in a straight line, It will bounce off of other things. It does penetrate through certain things, but we tried to create that fence. Then the landscaping, when it matures, will create even more so of a buffer. But as them sitting below us fairly substantially, the roof line might catch some noise. But again, most of our stuff will be projected upward because it's going to catch that fence and go up and over. It's a double-boxed cedar fence, which means that it has slats on the other side, 1/4 inch apart, where it's separated on one side where you see the sliver, and then there's a solid board on the back side of it. So we've had very good success with that in other communities in doing some sound deadening.
I think one thing that needs to be pointed out is, we've talked about R3 as one of the areas as a transitional between residential and, R1 and commercial. And so the fact that we've got R3 next to commercial really goes along with some of the planning objectives that we've been looking at.
Bill or Ben, so this is strictly a zoning tonight, then we have the plan development here, but then they come back with the plan. If the zoning would go forward, then the plan development would have to come back. If it doesn't have to come back.
No, that's a staff review, yes. And so
But
what
it
you're
could
looking at
if
tonight.
If it could come back here, we've done that before, if it was so requested to make sure that certain things were in that, because we have done that before, that even after the zoning, and then when the final plan, which he said will be sometime down the road, and we have specified that it would come back to get a final approval here before it went on to city council, but.
So are you asking, or are you asking Janet? Or?
We have done that, we could still do that tonight if it was so, as far as a part of the zoning, if it was put in the motion or amended to the motion.
The state code does afford for that you can put conditions of approval. And I know Casey's is pushing forward a statement of commitments that they've put together. I don't know if you saw that in your packet. So it addresses a lot of the sound. Basically, the site plan is a reflection of what they're committing to do, and I think they put it in visual format. So it makes it the conceptual a little more, I guess, palatable or easier to understand. But if you so decide as a commission, you can certainly make a motion and have it seconded that X commitment be added or X condition of approval. You can do that, yes.
And because they themselves have said they aren't finalized in that plan, so.
Well, the site plan isn't finalized as far as, there are still some things that we want to work out with them, and some of those involve the traffic, and we're waiting for the DOT to respond in how they think it should be done best. And we're looking at it in conjunction with our future 4th Street project that will happen in the next 2 to 3 years. So we really want to do that at the right time. I would suggest that if you think that the statement of commitments that they've proposed are important, and I do, if you would add them to your recommendation, if you do pass that, I would appreciate that, because I will probably recommend that the council not recommend approval without these commitments too. I know Casey's has indicated several times that they're willing to do as much as they can, and this is what they've put in writing, and we would like to hold them accountable to those commitments that they're making.
And it also allows for the homeowners to hold them accountable too, which is unique. I've never seen that before.
I have a question regarding sound, and if you'd come up and need some help. The item on this plan that seems to be the greatest sound generator is the car wash.
The turbines exiting the car wash to dry it, yes.
Okay. But that sound isn't uniformly distributed beyond the source. And you've got the building now oriented so that as people come out of the car wash, they're heading south.
Correct.
What effect does that have on having the sound flow disproportionately out that opening where the blowers and all of that are, as opposed to the sound that's at the other end where people go in, and the sound that's on the sides. I'm saying the sound is not going to be evenly distributed around this building or cast
Oh, no,
upon
it-
these folks. And
It will definitely be louder exiting to the south towards the street side. And that was part of us moving the car wash about 50 feet further south, pushing about as far south as I could grade-wise to make things work. We also discussed that the doors will operate that they close on the north side, shutting off sound going to the north. So it will push the sound to the south. The building also acts as a block. And then we have, I do have some information from our manufacturers of our dryers or blowers as they exit. At about 100 feet, it's about as, if you're in a direct line of sight, it's about the loudness of a vacuum cleaner that runs in your house. Depends on your vacuum. I have an older one that's louder, but, and it just I mean, the further away we are from someone, the more it dissipates the sound. And the more obstructions and barriers I can put between us and some, and the neighbors, the better the sound. So I have the building, which helps. Then I've got the fence. Then I'll have the landscaping that grows and matures. I mean, most of it's supposed to be quick growing, arborvitae, evergreen that provides a buffer year round. So I think we've taken many steps to do that. And again, the sound, you're exactly correct. It's not going to be uniform. It's not going to be the same on the south side as it is on the north side. And it's going to, as you get further away, it degrades fairly quickly. And just to give you an idea of some sound qualities, common speech is about 60 decibels. But it is a logarithmic curve, so it increases the amplitude fairly quickly. They gave another example of a iPod at full volumes at 110 decibels. So I don't recommend that. Does that answer your question?
it helps.
Okay.
It helps.
Is that the vacuum cleaners are in the south of the exit there? Is that what those are?
That is correct. There's 2 pull-off islands all the way down even further south that are also buffered by the fence. As you know, you can't see them. So the sound would have to travel up and over. And those are our standard, I think they're 75 cents now to run the vacuums.
What's the decibel level on those?
Those, depending on what horsepower motor they put in them, they range anywhere from 70 to 80. Also depends on if someone is like really holding it down and it makes a higher pitch because it starves the engine of air. You've all heard it whine a little bit with your shop vacs at home. But it should be about the sound of your shop vac at home, which is in that 70 to 80 decibel range.
Question I would have regarding your commitment letter,
Yeah.
is that a standard operating procedure of Casey's, or was that requested by the city, or?
I would actually defer that to Amy Costello from Casey's General Stores.
Hi, Amy Costello, Casey's General Stores. That commitment letter, we have done similar commitment letters in other communities. We initiated this on our own in response to our meeting with the neighbors. There were a number of concerns about a number of issues, and we felt the best way to address that was to put forward commitments that could be enforced by the city and also enforced by the neighbors. So should they feel that there's an issue that's not able to be resolved at the store level, they can come to the city for redress for the commitments that we're making. And so those were drafted in direct response to the meeting that we had with the neighbors.
Thank you.
John, I'm going to violate my own rule. Come on up.
Thank you. Once again, my name's John Campbell, 1001 10th Avenue Southwest, here in Waverly, Iowa. The only reason I want to reapproach is because of something that's been brought up by the commissioner, matter of fact, by the city attorney. One of those items is, if this commission is going to consider this rezoning change, I don't think you should base it upon whether or not the city can make the changes at that intersection without Casey's commitment. You've already seen that the city has approved the new bridge, the Prairie Link extension, and that, I believe, will bring the bridge and the traffic up to that intersection. That in itself will determine, along with the 4th Street expansion, the changes that are needed. Another one is that, yes, I do believe it is spot zoning, and I have been before the commission upon a couple of occasions for rezoning request. And the 10th Avenue rezoning, or excuse me, commercial, was under Coventry because I was one that requested the limitations. Those are single level, and they were restricted to no convenience type stores. And that was agreed upon by the landowners to satisfy the residents that were on the south side of 10th Street. And that goes back to about 1995. So I don't feel that it is a true comparison of commercial, and that situation with Casey's, and once again, it's not Casey's. It's the R1 change to a commercial that you're requesting rezoning for that I disagree with. Thank you once again.
Around the commission. Where are we?
I have to be honest, I struggle with this. I do. I mean, if I lived in those condos, I'd be sitting out there tonight, absolutely. I hear the argument about the arterial intersection, and it doesn't seem unreasonable to have a gas station at an intersection of 2 arterials. That makes sense to me. As I drive into Waverly, and I'm coming in from the south, and I get through the kind of development stuff south of this point, I feel like this is the point where it says, this is where the town really starts. And I don't think a gas station is the thing that says this is who we are. So I'm really struggling with the idea that this is the thing at that point. I would not have as much trouble with it if it were a bank or not something quite so active all the time. It strikes me as a little too far for this point. I think that the traffic thing can be taken care of. I don't question that. I know that the engineers can come up with a solution. I think the stormwater is being managed adequately. And I see a lot of that in what I do. I think that Casey's has done a good job of coming back and addressing the issues, and I appreciate that too. But I have to say, I'm just not convinced that this is the best location for something this active at this time. And I'm really struggling with that. There's doctor's offices on the other corner, or whatever is going to be over there. The cemetery is going to stay quiet.
Hopefully.
The church, is busy once a week, and there's so many driveways coming off on that other side. I don't really understand how the traffic's ever going to really work on the south side of the eastbound lane. That's a struggle for me, and I think it is kind of a traffic nightmare. I do, and I think it's going to be hard to solve. In terms of the pedestrian path thing and the people walking through there, yeah, it's a trail. I wouldn't say that it would be the most attractive trail. It's going to be a heavily trafficked spot, no matter which way you bend it. So I don't know that that's a convincing argument for me. But the biggest argument for me is this is the point where it really becomes Waverly, and the Waverly we know, the historic drive down with the tree-lined street as you go past the park. Casey's is not not Casey's specifically, but a gas station, convenience store, is not the thing that says this is our town for me. And while I supported it last time this came through, I'm not convinced I can support it now.
I have a question for Bill. On this commitment letter, I don't see anything in there as to you know, if the fence is falling down, which is one of the things, maintain the fence, what, other than the fact that it's in violation of the commitment letter, what is the recourse?
It's a violation of city code, number one.
Yeah, I assume it might even fall within a municipal infraction.
We
Because
have a
you're
landscaping
making-
ordinance, and it's kind of a little bit of an overlap to address your question. So if a fence is falling down and they were obligated to put one up, which they are because of commercial use next to residential, it would be a city ordinance alone. So notwithstanding the statement of commitments, we could go after it on our own as a city because it's in the ordinance that they're obligated to keep up and maintain what they have
Okay,
for
but I
a visual
mean-
barrier.
I mean, even the other items there.
Sure.
I mean, if they're not cleaning up, do we go in, I mean, do we have the recourse to go in and clean up and find them and?
Injunctive relief, municipal infractions,
If it's creating a nuisance condition, right?
Right.
Excess garbage laying around.
and they're
stuff like
setting
that,
up
yeah.
their conditions of what would be a nuisance.
Okay.
I mean, they're setting up their own criteria as to what's a nuisance on their property. So if they're running the car wash at midnight and they're supposed to stop at 10 o'clock, they're creating noise against our noise ordinance,
So the statement of commitments are
binding.
binding by
Enforceable.
and enforceable. Then number 8 takes care of your question about the fence falling down, that commitment, so.
Do we anticipate also creating a private cause of action then for the adjoining property owners to enforce and/or, seek damages for something like that? I mean, the way it's written to say these commitments may be enforced jointly and severally by, how else would they have to enforce it then? It'd have to be privately through some type of.
Sounds like it would be, yeah, if the city refused to do that,
Right.
that the person could. It does look like that.
I'd have to say that, I don't think I agree with you that it's not spot zoning. To a certain extent, I think the condos are the spot zoning. And I don't know that, when that was done, whether that was something that I would agree with. I think I see Fourth as being commercial almost the entire extent all the way up to Bremer Avenue at some point in the future. I think that the surrounding, the cemetery is, the church, I don't think that's out of character for that area. And I guess whether it's Casey's or Quick Star or any other commercial facility, I think that's an appropriate place for it. I feel that the traffic conditions, I think they've been identified. I think the city is aware of it. They have a plan in place to handle that. So from the safety standpoint, I think that's been identified and would be handled.
Rich, we haven't heard from you.
I'm trying to think again. The motion is to rezone. It is not to rezone for Casey's. Is it an appropriate use to change this from R1 to C2? And the answer to that, I believe, is clearly yes. I believe Casey's has done a very admirable job to come up with their commitments. I'm impressed. And I'm very glad the city didn't ask you to do that, because I would then have to be on the opposite side of my opinion. But I think that Casey's has done a nice job, but I'm not going to support this because of Casey's. I'm going to support this because I think it does fall well within the future land use map and the planning that we've gone through. I too believe that 4th and 10th will be commercial corridors. And that is essential within the city. I think this is a proper use, and I think that if we rezone it C2 and someone decides they want to put an apartment complex in there, great. That's allowed in C2. So the reality is, I think we should change it to C2, and if Casey's is the one that goes ahead and buys it, they fit within C2, I would support that.
Other comments? Lance?
I guess thinking about the traffic, and I don't know that I have specific concerns with that, but it seems to me that Casey's is trying to tap into an existing flow of traffic and not necessarily creating more than what's going through there now already, because these are, important streets going through. So, like Rich says, I think these are bound to be developed and are going to be utilized that way. So, in this context, I just can't see a good reason not to allow the rezoning at this point, but.
Have we missed anybody?
Heidi?
I know last time I had felt very strongly about this being maybe a different type of commercial, more of a lower use, lower traffic area with the C1. And to be honest, over the last few months, I've thought about it fairly frequently of what to do. And I guess where I've gone back and forth is I really do feel that corridor between both of those routes is going to be future growth for Waverly in the area of commercial. And as we keep talking now for the last few years over our land use plan, over the different types of zoning that we do have, the different residential, the different commercial, it feels like it's where we need to go. And it's very hard because we have residential areas that really don't fit those anymore, but they're the ones that were there first. And so as we're looking at the development of Waverly, how do we make that match with what our history was, with where we're trying to go? And that's really been where I've struggled. I do feel like the concessions or the commitments that Casey's is making are addressing a large number of the concerns. I was very concerned about the traffic side, and I think that there's opportunities to make those, and I feel like the people, whether it's the DOT, Waverly working together, are going to do what's best when it comes to the traffic in that area and working through it. And I think we're just still growing into that. So I'm still, 1 minute to the next, I'm still struggling with what the right use is. I think it is inevitable that that will be commercial throughout that area.
David?
Well, I would agree that I think this is a zoning issue. I do think that it needs to go to commercial. I am concerned about the driveways. I think that we should move that driveway for going into the church farther to the west instead of bringing it to the east, because I think there's land available to push those to the west, because I just think it's too close if we try to line those up. I think that's something that needs to be looked at, but that's beside the point. That's to be worked out with the traffic work on there. This is a zoning issue. I think that I would still like Casey's and the homeowners to, if it does pass, to continue to work on this car wash. I think the vacuums and the car wash, when I've been around them, they're still very noisy, and I think that it could be something that could make everybody come together here if the car wash wasn't there, but that's for the Casey's and the people, if this does pass, to work that out. I do feel that the traffic can be worked out. I would rather see that 5-lane, 4-lane go down past the bowling alley. I think it would be much better than trying to bring 3 lanes, 3-lane, and then right there at 8th Street, start expanding with turning lanes. But I think those are things that can be worked out with the city and DOT. And the turning lights, I come by that every morning and evening, and I do think the traffic signals are needed now, because I've seen that traffic backed up into the inside lane, and where you have to go out around the turning lane to get in because of traffic. And so I think it's important that we do that sooner than later. But I do feel that it is needs to be zone Z2. I do think, I think we talk about the church. I think the church, it'll be a matter of time that once that is all the way through on the Cedar Valley Parkways all the way through. I wouldn't be surprised if the church will get bought out someday by somebody and become a commercial, some type of commercial at that time too, so. But I am in support of it.
Any other comments? Dave, did you want to add an amendment to it, or are you?
No, I don't, I mean,
satisfied
if it's, I just think, I'd hope that if it does pass, that the homeowners in Casey's continue to work out, see if they can come to some kind of a solution on that. Because I think, I can see their concerns with the noise, the visual parts taken care of, but the noise could be a factor, especially for those people out there on their decks. I don't know. I just have been enough around car washes to know that those are noisy. I don't know if it can be really taken care of, but that's something that they have to work on. I just was making sure that was up and people knew that that's been available in the past. And so if there's somebody that so desires to see that happen, I just want to make sure they knew that that was available.
Good. You ready to vote? The motion is in front of us. I'm going to ask the administrator to do a roll call.
We'll start in the middle. Gritters.
Yes.
User.
Yes.
Payne.
No.
Solheim.
Yes.
Bagelman.
Yes.
Dane.
Yes.
And French.
Yes.
Okay, the motion is passed. There are 3,
6-1.
6 yes votes and 1 no vote. And the motion is passed. And we'll forward it on to the city council. Next item of business is,
I don't think so.
That wasn't enough.
any regular business? I don't believe so. Any old business? Is there any new business? And do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Been moved, and we are adjourned.